Hi, y'all. It's Bridget Cutshaw with Real Things Living. Today, my guest is Marianne Richmond. She is a longtime children's book author, and she is here to share her new upcoming book coming up. It's actually nonfiction for adults. Can you say hi, Marianne?
Hello, everybody.
I appreciate you being on, and I enjoy speaking to authors, especially those who do children's books, right? And because we want to help the younger generation, I think, learn.
Yes.
And I guess my first thing that came to my mind before we get into your new book is what prompted you to start writing, to begin with.
Gosh, yeah, that is so interwoven into the story that we're going to talk about shortly. And it was while I was recovering from some significant health challenges. To be honest, I was just kind of bored and bald at the same time, and was filling my time really post during a recovery time. And I decided to self-publish this story I wrote. And this was long before self-publishing was a thing. And I started hand selling that one book I made. And pretty soon I sold 10,000 copies of this book. It was crazy. And that's how I got started being an author. It was, yeah, that serendipitous. So
I really like that, and I think we learn. I'm assuming that book had the illustrations in there too.
yes, and I did those.
Oh wow!
I didn't know what I was doing. And yeah, it was that independent streak in me where it's like, I don't know how to find an illustrator. So I'm just going to do it myself. And you can tell for sure.
Well, yeah, if you're detail oriented, right? But I just think it's being creative. I think it helps you because you said you were bored, but you also needed some place to express some creativity to help with healing. That's just
Totally. 100%. Yes, yes.
right. So now, as an adult, been around a while, now your most recent book is going to be coming out next month. It's called "If You Were My Daughter," and it's probably based on it's a memoir, right?
It is a memoir. Mm-hmm.
So what prompted you to do that? I think maybe because maybe you're not tired of children's books, but you wanted to share the story behind everything.
That is yeah, you just said it. This feels like taking a step back and explaining the story behind all the stories I've written, which at this point is probably close to 60. I've sold more than 9 million copies of those children's books. And this story is the why behind my life's work. Why I write the messages I do, what prompted me to, how I got started, like that whole journey. And the memoir is called If You Were My Daughter, and the subtitle is Healing an Unmothered Heart. And I really, really pondered that subtitle for a long time because it is that is the theme of my experience. And it is my story of growing up with misdiagnosed epilepsy and an emotionally unavailable mother that honestly caused me to question my sanity and certainly my self-worth before finding both a physical path to healing or a path to physical healing and emotional healing, and directly informed why I've spent a lifetime writing uplifting messages for children.
That's good. You're trying to take your experience and just let them know there is some hope out there. That's really how I see this. I've
Yeah.
had people, you probably get this too, like I like to focus on the word hope too.
Of
Some
course.
people find that weird, but I don't find it weird. It's very helpful.
To focus on hope, you said, right? Did I
Yes.
understand that? Yeah. Oh, interesting that people wouldn't want to focus on hope, but yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm
I'm
just,
thinking about that.
I think with me and you, very similar in a way. I didn't have your experience, but I just find being hope. I'd rather choose hope. I like to choose being positive. That's kind of how, and it's, you have to acknowledge, right, something that's going wrong, and then how to fix it. That's kind of where I should say fix it, and change or improve it. And that's kind of how resilience kind of takes place because you're not born with resilience, right?
For sure. I mean, it has to be cultivated, and it can be really hard to keep. I mean, there's actually a chapter in my memoir called Dashed Hope, because there were times I felt like I was going to get so close to an answer. And then for whatever reason, it was yanked from me. And I was young going through this. I mean, I had my first full body seizure at 9 years old. And
Wow.
there was 15 years of dashed hope, of doctors not believing me. So I'm 9, telling them about my experience, and was told everything from I had a conversion disorder, which is a fancy way of saying that I'm psychologically causing my physical symptoms, that it's more of a mental problem manifesting as a physical problem. Well, at 9, I already knew that that was not true. Um, and then what complicated my journey was I had a mother. Speaking of the generational trauma topic, I mean, I like to say that the stories that we're born into shape the ones we tell about ourselves. And the story I was born into was being mothered by a woman who 10 years prior to me showing up on the planet, she was in the Air Force and she underwent electroshock therapy for depression. And that was at a time when that treatment was very barbaric and traumatized her. Um, and she became convinced that she was a victim of mind control experiments by the CIA.
Oh, wow.
That, yeah, wow is right. That is the narrative that she created and hung on to for really the rest of her life. And that impacted her ability to see me, hear me, treat me as an individual. She was parenting out of her own fear and thus would not allow me to have medical intervention for my issue. She did not allow me to have medication for
Wow.
my seizures. So I felt incredibly abandoned because I was essentially, I mean, I was not able to exist safely in my body, in my physical space. I mean, I was just terrified for decades.
Wow. Did you have any siblings as you were talking? Or scared?
Yeah, I did. And it felt like I was living in a family. It was 5 of us, my mom, my dad, and 2 brothers and me. And I felt like I was living in a home of 5 individuals all fending for themselves. My dad was hard of hearing from a very young age. And so he physically could not even hear me. So if I was yelling for help, for example, he just couldn't hear me. So that left me completely dependent on my mom. And my brothers were really just kind of occupied with their own lives. So it was a very lonely journey, kind of screaming internally for help and then not getting it.
Right. That's
Yep.
your brothers, are they older? Are you just curious?
Yeah. They're 2 and 3 years older than me.
Okay.
And they've both, well, one brother has read my memoir. And I think, honestly, I think it gave him a lot of guilt of where was I? And yet I'm not angry about that. It's more like, yeah, that was the family vibe, if you will. Um, and I want to just interject at this point, we talk about trauma a lot. That word is trauma thrown around a lot. And a fellow therapist, because I actually went on and got a master's in mental health counseling, but she described trauma as overwhelming helplessness. And oh, did I resonate with that definition?
Right.
Because that was the crux of my experience, was overwhelming helplessness with no empathetic witness, with no empathetic presence to shepherd me through the journey. So it's like the combination of those things was the trauma.
Wow. And you definitely found a way, thank goodness, to find your own worth right? At some point, that's right, because you felt helpless and then traumatic, but then you knew something triggered that in you. You have value, Marianne, right?
But that took a long time.
Right.
I mean, I want to say as recent as the last 5 years
Oh, wow.
for it to become embodied. I could hear it. It made sense to me to realize that my worth is independent of my circumstances. I can hear people say that. That sounds great. But for that to become an embodied experience, honestly, has been more recent than I would like to
Right.
admit. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is just wow, I'm just at a wow moment because I knew a little bit about your background, but I didn't know the in-depth part with your whole family because that is really shapes who you're going to be. And you didn't let it hold you back. I mean, eventually.
Eventually, it's right. No, I think there's also a sentence in my book that my initial creations, my initial books, I like to say came from a place of almost aspirational, that I liked to believe this is how it could be, that I could be loved like this, that the words I was writing to my own children, I'm now a mom of 4 young adults, that it's like, wouldn't that be great if? I mean, I felt that love for them for sure, but wouldn't it be great if I felt the same love from my own parents? But then the arc of my writing career, as I experienced my own healing, then I felt like I was really writing from a more embodied place. So the writing was very much a part of the journey to get there.
And these kind of stories the story you're sharing is really helps people connect with you. And then they're not alone in the journey. Everybody, again, like you mentioned, the trauma stuff, we all think we're doing this. We only have this experience. And I think it gives them hope. Again, I'm going back to that word hope.
Yeah, yeah.
Listening to you, hope is what has helped so many people get through. And I don't know why some of us are wired negatively. Could be their upbringing.
Well, that raises a really good topic because in the therapy world, there is a therapy called narrative therapy.
Okay.
And it is looking at the variables of our story and reauthoring them to a more uplifting, hopeful story. Because you can take the same elements of what has happened and tell many different narratives with the same elements.
Right.
And for a long time, I was telling a very victim laden story. It was really easy to do because I mean, I was a victim for sure. A victim of my mom's inabilities and like that generational stuff. But at some point, it feels really heavy to keep lugging that version around.
It is. We all have I really feel bad for the women, like my mother and your mother, what they had to deal with. I try to have empathy for that. And now that I've gotten older,
Yeah.
my mother's had things too. It's like, wow, when I learned about that, but they weren't as open about that kind of stuff as this newer generation. I should say younger generation.
Oh, so true. And that it was really the key to, I talk about like acceptance versus forgiveness and like that whole bucket of stuff. And as I dove more into my mom's own story, like she got dementia. She died uh, after about a decade of Alzheimer's, and she essentially forgot everything, including who I was.
Oh, wow.
Right. So there was no resolution between us where there was this coming together and we were able to, I don't know, yeah, see each other's point of view, and like none of that happened. So there is a decision of acceptance and letting go and forgiveness. And what was helpful to me to allow me to do that is diving into her story and trading some of that condemnation for compassion. Yeah.
Right. as you were saying that she got Alzheimer's, you think the shock in your brain has probably something to do with it.
She blamed it on that.
Mhm.
She certainly did. Yeah, I'm telling you, it was a lifelong belief of hers. And I don't believe that, frankly, the CIA was involved.
Right, right.
My, but that was her truth. That is what helped her make sense of her story. It's like, oh, this is what happened to me.
It's kind of like an excuse for her behavior, maybe.
Possibly.
Yeah.
She was writing letters to the CIA for years and years and years to try to get accountability.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Became her life's journey. Oh. And there I am like, hello, could you take a look at me for a minute?
Right, I'm right here. Right, right. I'm right here.
To turn your gaze this way. And see, I'm laughing. It was so not funny. It was so not funny at the time.
Right.
Uh, but the more distance I get, the more I can see her as a depressed woman who was essentially talked into marriage. She was
Oh,
very vocal about
okay.
that she never wanted to be married to my dad. That was a little hard to hear as a kid. It's like, oh, great. But her religion kept her in the marriage. And so I think honestly, she felt completely trapped and depressed and just endured her life as best she could.
Did she work outside the house at all? I'm just curious.
She did not until we were in high school. She was a secretary. Yeah, just to get out of the house and make some money. But I had heard so many times about how motherhood was not for her. She would rather be a career woman, all that stuff that I think, to your point about the permission that women of that generation felt they had or had not. She was happiest when she was in the Air Force. I mean, aside from the electroshock therapy, she loved being part of a community. She loved belonging to that. It was her biggest source of pride.
It is, if you think about it, it is impressive to be in the Air Force as a woman.
Yeah, right. She was a captain. She was
Wow.
one of the few women, um, and that was, I think, her peak. Honestly,
Right. And then I think maybe that's why she took it out on you and probably your brothers too, I'm assuming, kind of were ignored as well. I should say ignored, but
well, and I don't. You use the word "took it out on us," and I don't think that she intended any harm, but she was just not capable.
right.
In fact, I had a ton of therapy through this, and I remember one therapist saying, "Your mom is incapable of connection," and it didn't make it any easier because she certainly seemed capable in other areas. And I remember saying, "Well, she certainly knows how to do this, that, and that. If she would turn her attention toward this, I think she could succeed." And it just wasn't either a desire or
Right. I was thinking that she didn't want to do it for some.
no, I don't think so. Because she sure made progress in the things she wanted to.
Right. She put the effort into it. And wow, I just got the chills because you just don't know. I don't know. I just think you're brave sharing this story. I mean, it's important. Like I said, before we started recording, I read your background. We have a lot more in common. My mother doesn't have that, but she has a different issue. My mom was married 3 times by the time I was 17.
Gosh, okay.
So you can imagine my attitude.
For sure.
But everyone has to deal with it differently. And a lot has to do with my mother was married to military guys. And that when you're in the military, that just kind of mess up the family environment.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of instability, I would imagine.
Hmm.
And, you talked before about the stories shaping our journeys, and so much of that goes back to those early attachments.
Yes.
The secure attachment versus insecure. And To be parented by an emotionally unavailable person obviously manifests into either this anxious sort of vibe or avoidant, where you're slow to trust. And that is definitely more me. I didn't trust anybody. The doctors, I certainly didn't trust what they were saying. I didn't trust my mom. And you carry that distrustful spirit into the world, and that shows up everywhere. Friendships,
Yeah.
relationships, workplace. Yeah, you're sort of holding everyone at arm's length.
And you mentioned the doctor stuff as a child. That is just shock. I mean, they're supposed to be these quote experts,
Oh,
right? And they're not listening to you.
yeah.
Or you're right, and they're just blowing it off. That to me probably brought you a little bit stronger because you knew you had to get out of it, that situation.
I wrote them all letters. Because what happened, spoiler alert, is I had a brain tumor. I mean, we talked about this.
Right.
And so, of course, at 26, I'm writing them all letters. I'm going back into my history and I'm finding that doctor who saw me at 9, and I'm telling them all, like, you were wrong. I just felt like it was I needed to let them know, like they remember me, right?
Right. Right.
I felt vindicated. Years later, I felt vindicated.
That's something that I believe in, is to have that compassionate care now in health. Well, it's been a problem for a long time, but you're going to not help the patient if you're not listening to them and just they're assuming.
Right. Or even to see how the experience is impacting you. It's one thing to say, okay, I'm not sure exactly what's wrong with you. And it gotta be, what's wrong with you? That could have been the title of the book right there. Because that phrase, we're going to find out what's wrong with you, must have been repeated thousands of times in my upbringing. But for someone to see you as the terrified person you are, like, I don't know what's wrong, but I can also see what this is doing to you. That is healing, that witnessing. And to bring that back to the book, the title, If You Were My Daughter, those words were the exact words that my neurosurgeon spoke to me. Finally.
I love that. I love that. Yes.
Finally, in my 20s, this doctor said, if you were my daughter, this is what I would do. And it changed everything.
What kind of tumor did they say it was?
Yeah, it was called an astrocytoma, which was thankfully benign, but apparently it was a kind that, of course, could morph and change and grow. Yeah, so it came out, but fortunately, I did not need radiation or chemotherapy. Yeah, the only aftermath of that tumor was that I lost sensation in my left hand, because it was in this exact spot in my brain that impacted my left hand.
Oh, okay. That I just got chilled because I have a vestibular schwannoma, which is on the balance nerve. And I had asked my neurosurgeon, if this was your wife, would you do the surgery? That's how I was an adult though, and he said no, because my situation is a little different. It would have caused paralysis.
Correct.
Located. But some people, you got to have the support. You got to ask questions. And I'm glad that you asked the questions. And you're probably a believer too in seeing different specialists, because they're all going to have different opinions or perspectives. Is that a better word?
Yeah. Oh, they sure do. I got a lot of them. And
Right.
I could still picture me at 24, maybe. I was living in New York or Connecticut, and I was working in New York. And I was taking the subway myself with these big MRI scans, in a big envelope, sitting on the subway, going to these doctors and showing up in their offices as a young woman and asking them their opinions. And then sitting and listening to myself thinking, okay, that doesn't sound right. And then going to another one and and trying to sift through all that on my own.
That is scary because you didn't have any support, but it shows you how brave and how much tenacity that you have. I
I,
think it built strength in you, even though you had a bad experience, multiple bad, it's really made you stronger.
oh, for sure. There's your resilience piece right
Yeah,
there.
that's your resilience base. And
Yeah.
I just wanted to know, you mentioned something about can't even say the word homeopathy. Is that something that you,
Homeopathy.
homeopathy, sorry.
Yeah. Well, people may pronounce that different ways. That's a good question. I always said homeopathy, but
Yeah.
I could be wrong too.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah. So, I feel like that is a whole, I think people have different viewpoints on that in 2025 than they did in when was it? I think it was early 1980s when I was doing that. And my mom, again, because she was desperate for non-medical answers, she took me to this woman in Madison, Wisconsin, who called herself a homeopathist. And by the time I left her office, she had told me that I had cerebral allergies.
Wow.
Okay. And this is also in writing. I have all this paperwork from those days, and sent me on my way with lots of things to drink and what she called them tinctures to drink. Right. And again, I am 16, 17. I care about prom and I care about my boyfriend. And this all just seemed crazy to me. Like, oh, because what I want to add is in 7th grade, a guy had a seizure next to me in my classroom. This is pretty pivotal because his mom would come in our classroom and talk about her son and say, he has epilepsy and this is what you should do if he has a seizure. And sure enough, he has a seizure right next to me,
Oh my gosh.
right next to me, as if to say, here you go. Here's your answer. You have this. And I went running home from school. I was so excited because I had figured out my own problem. I had epilepsy. I could have been him. And I run in the house and I tell my mom how I have epilepsy. I even described the kind of epilepsy, and she shut me down.
Right.
And it was that word was never mentioned again between us. And so fast forward, and she's taking me to this other homeopathist, and I'm like, no, I have epilepsy. That's what's wrong with me. I don't need to drink these things. So it all just was such a, yeah, I don't want to swear.
That's okay. That's okay. It's just amazing. Right. She was disconnected kind of in a way. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry you had to deal with that. And I think while your body has healed and those scars have helped you help other people. Does that make sense? And with all your writing, it's
Yeah.
so where can people learn more about you, Marianne?
Yes. I would say that the fullest picture of Marianne is on my website. So that's just my name.com, and I'll spell it for your listeners, but it's Marianne. So one word, Marianne. And then Richmond, RICHMOND.com. You can see all the links for ordering my memoir. It's coming out on March 18th, exactly a month from this time.
Right, we're recording.
Very serendipitous. And then all my kids' books are on there, so you can see, what was birthed for the kids in us. I would say for the child within, for other children, for your children, to create those attachments with your own kids through those uplifting words. I mean, I like to think of my books as the witness for your heart. Like if you're not getting that caring witness that you need, let my books be that for you. Let them come alongside you in your journey.
I like that. I like your positive attitude. I think it's so helpful. And I definitely look forward to your book coming out. And I will tell my nephews who have children now about their children's books.
I would love if you would.
I'm not a grandma yet, but anyway. But it's really fascinating what I shouldn't say fascinating, but I mean that in a positive way.
Thank
'Cause
you.
the end of the journey, you're sharing everything. And for those that are listening, I'll include her website link in the
Thank
description. And this is awesome. We definitely need to talk again. I just love this. I love your personality.
That's so nice. Thank you. And it's been just a joyful morning to connect with you.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.